Hello everyone. Today I am going to be talking about citing textual evidence. Hope everyone's doing well today. And I'm going to try to keep this lesson as concise as possible, but there is a lot to talk about and a lot to think about with citing textual evidence and why it's important. And this is something we're going to be doing a lot throughout the year, so I think it's just a smart idea to go ahead and introduce this idea early and for you all to keep it in mind, because not only are we going to be using it with our new short story that we're going to be reading next week, but we're also going to be using it a considerable amount with Into the Wild. And I think citing textual evidence actually builds pretty logically upon annotating text, because citing is actually its own form of annotation in a way, and I'll explain what I mean by that when we get there. But I'm actually going to hide the tools for now. What does citing textual evidence mean exactly? So, move the camera here. All right. This is basically another way of saying prove it. So when a teacher, say myself, was saying, I want you to cite textual evidence for this claim you're making or for this statement you're making about the text, I'm basically asking you to prove your point or to prove where you found something. Um, and it's basically providing actual physical proof from the text itself, a quote from the author that you're using, that you're reading about, and using that evidence in order to further strengthen what you are saying. So oftentimes, when you're writing an essay or when you're writing a paper, you will not only need to make a claim about what you're saying, which we're not really going to talk about claims today. I think claims is something we need to get deeper into later on, because claims is a whole other thing. And since we're going to be writing an argumentative paper later, it may be this semester, it might be next semester, I'm not sure yet. It'll depend on how we pace ourselves. But either way, we are going to be writing an argumentative paper, and you'll have to make a claim there. So we'll talk about claims separately in another lesson. But you're not only going to need to make a claim about what you're saying, but also you're going to have to prove your claim by using specific evidence from the text. And just as a general rule, I mean, in life in general, you need to back up any claim you have with proof. If you're having a debate with another person and you're making some pretty bold claims about your point of view on this particular debate you're having, then you're going to need proof to back up what you're saying. You're going to need statistics. That's the case for any field of work, really. If I was to just tell you that, you know, grammar is important for English, that I could say that, and you would be totally valid to ask me, well, show me proof why grammar is so important. And I mean, I could show you proof that grammar helps improve our language and helps improve our communication with other people. That's just an example there. But yeah, just with anything, really, you need some sort of backup. And often quotes from reputable or reliable textual sources can help make your claims stronger, and they do help. Most academic essays are going to ask you to do that, and most college essays are going to ask you to do that in the future. All right, so why do we cite textual evidence? I already sort of gave one reason, but another is to help avoid plagiarism, because sometimes when we are making a claim, we'll sometimes say what the author is saying and almost sort of plagiarize or copy exactly what they were saying. That issue is pretty much totally forgotten about when you actually cite the quote itself and actually just use the quote and tell what page number and everything and what author you got it from. It helps to avoid that, and plagiarism is a very serious issue. It becomes a lot more serious in college and in the work field. If you actually plagiarize someone, or just say verbatim what they say without providing the evidence itself or doing the proper citations, then you can get in some serious trouble. It can result in expulsion from college or getting fired from your job. So it's very important to do proper citations. Also, like I said, it provides the reader with concrete proof, something they can actually look at and go back to. When a reader sees a quote that you give, you put in actual quotations, and you give an author and a page number of where that quote is, there's that concrete proof that the reader can go to and actually look at and see, is the person actually telling the truth in what they're saying? Oh, yeah, they are. I can see this concrete proof here that gives them some evidence to back up what they're saying. And like I said just a minute ago, you will often need to back up claims you make in real life. So this just provides you with a good practice. I think using textual evidence in writing provides you with good practice of just backing up your claims in even casual conversation in real life. So it just gives you that formal way of doing it, and it often gets you in the habit of practicing backing up your claims and practicing using evidence in any other aspect of your life. All right, so there's actually some proper formatting you need to do when you're making textual evidence. Now, there's a part of this that I've purposefully taken out, and that's the claim. The claim would actually come after the introductory phrase. But we're not focusing on claims right now, so I've taken claim out. So only use this formatting right now, and I want you to keep this formatting in mind. I would advise you to maybe go back to this slide if you need to later on, especially when you do your assignment tomorrow, which will have you practicing more textual evidence with a news article. But here is the formatting. So first you always need to start out with some sort of introductory phrase before you introduce the quote you're using. Because generally when you're saying use text evidence, the person is asking you to use a quote from the text, a specific quote that you find. And that's what I'm going to be asking. Every time I say use text evidence, you'll know that I mean to find a quote from the text and use that quote and format properly around that quote. So you need to begin with an introductory phrase, introducing where you got the quote from, or maybe what the article is about you got the quote from, or what the text is about you got the quote from. This can become a lot more complex when you're using a novel, but we'll get into that when we get there. And then after the introductory phrase, you put the actual quote in. So after you've introduced what the text is about, you put the quote there. Then you have to have the correct formatting, which I will explain in just a second. There's this very specific formatting you have to use when citing quotes, and it's a bit petty and a bit specific, but it is important just for academic properness and everything like that. And then you have to have an explanation of the quote. You can't just leave the reader hanging with the quote and not provide any type of explanation about what that quote means for what you're saying. So I have an example down here, and I've color-coded everything like with this up here, so all the colors match what is up here. So I used this BBC article, which was about how streaming has been spiking and going up during the lockdown, and I thought this was an interesting article to use because it's relevant. And for your all's assignment tomorrow, you're actually going to be using an article about something to do with the coronavirus as well, but I just got a specific quote from it. So in the New York Times article by Amal Rajan, he says that dramas helped BBC iPlayer attract a record 570 million program requests in May 2020. And then this shows that streaming online has had a huge uptick in popularity during the pandemic. Now, let me go point by point. So, first of all, this in red, of course, is my introductory phrase. And I would say, as a general rule, when you're introducing a quote, it's helpful for you to introduce where you got the quote from and the author you got the quote from. So I got this from not a New York Times article. Let me change that real quick. Sorry. In the Yeah, it's also important to be sure you get the source right, and I did not, which was my bad. But in the BBC article by Amal Rajan, he says that, and that's a simple introduction you can do, and that one's perfectly valid. It doesn't have to be anything super complex. It can just be where you got the article from, where you got the quote from, and the author who wrote the quote. Now, when you're doing a longer form essay, if you keep on using the same article, you won't always have to say the author's name over and over again or the article's name itself. Just the first time that you do it, you need to introduce it. And introductory phrases can vary from place to place. So if I had already introduced this article before, if I've already talked about this BBC article before, then I could just say something like, Rajan says that, and they would get the idea because I've already introduced that this was from a BBC article, so I wouldn't need to mention it again. But I'm acting as if this is the first time I've ever mentioned this article, so I need to do both. I need to introduce the article, and I need to introduce the author. Now, here's the quote. This is an easy part, just putting the quote in. Now, something I did, you'll notice these ellipses here, the dot, dot, dots. Let me go to where I found the quote. That's not it. There it is. Okay, so this quote is from right here. Now, something you'll notice is that in this quote, I took out everything from this phrase, normal people in Killing Eve helped BBC, or normal people in Killing Eve, and then I took out the 72% higher as well. As you can tell, I put the dot, dot, dot there. That is something you can actually do in a quote. If you're wanting to take out some excess information that doesn't really need to be there and isn't really necessary, then you can just put a dot, dot, dot. So the dot, dot, dot is taking out this normal people in Killing Eve part, so that I can just go from dramas to helped BBC iPlayer attract a record 570 million program requests. So if you're wanting to take out some excess information, then you can just do that by putting dot, dot, dots in. If anybody has any questions about that, then let me know. But that's something you can do. If you want to use the whole quote, then you're invited to. Now, this yellow part is the correct formatting. Now, this is very specific, but these are the rules. So, you have to put the page number in parentheses. Now, with the article I used, there weren't actual page numbers on it, so I just put it into a Google Doc, and the page I happened to cite was from page 2. Some places it'll just be, there won't be page numbers on the place itself, so you might have to copy the article or the text or whatever into a Google Doc and see what page number it's on and just use that. Now, if you don't mention the author in your introductory statement, so if I didn't say Amal Rajan here, if I took that out, then in the parentheses, I'd have to put his last name as well. So I'd have to put Rajan 2 and then a period. But since I mentioned his name at the beginning, all I have to put is a page number in parentheses. And then this might seem a little over-specific, but the period always has to come after the parentheses. Now, this might not make much sense to you all because you all might be wondering, why does a period not come in the quote? And there's not really a great explanation I have for that. It's just, it makes it look better in formatting if you put the period after, because you also are including this introductory statement in your sentence, not just a quote. So it just makes more sense to put the period after you've said everything. And then this purple section is my explanation. So I'm saying what the quote was basically showing or saying, what the author was saying with the quote. And with this quote, he was saying that streaming online has gotten really popular during the pandemic. So you'll need some sort of explanation about the quote as well. If you don't provide an explanation, then the quote looks a lot weaker because the reader is going to think you don't know what the quote is saying, and it's not helping you strengthen your claim any. So be sure to include an explanation after you cite the quote. Now, some more formatting rules. First of all, like I just said, if you don't mention the author in your introductory sequence, you have to put them in. Oops. Let me change that real quick. You have to put them meaning the author, in parentheses along with the page number after your quote. And remember, periods always come after the parentheses in a quote. So period after the parentheses. Easy sort of alliteration technique to remember, period after parentheses. All right, so now you're going to do some of your own practice. So since this is on Edpuzzle, the video is going to pause in just a second, and I'm going to ask you a question. So let me make sure. All right. So I want you to look at this evidence below. So I'm using this article once again. So in the BBC article, he says, Channel 4's on-demand service, All 4, generated 30% more views among the 16 to 34s in the first 2 weeks of lockdown. And then page 3. This shows that being shut in at home has really made people turn to streaming as a source of entertainment. Now that I've read the quote, I'm going to pause and ask you a question about the quote to see if you remember what I said about formatting. All right, so the question I asked was, what is the introductory statement in this quote? And the introductory statement is, in the BBC article, he says. So if you answered that, then that is correct. Now, as for the rest of the formatting, of course, the quote is this, and then there's a proper formatting of putting the page number and parentheses, and then here's the explanation. This shows that being shut in at home has really made people turn to streaming as a source of entertainment. So I've provided you now with 2 examples of proper formatting and how to use that. So I want you to be sure that you can do that on your own. Now, you don't have to do this assignment today, although if you want to, you can. But this assignment is technically for tomorrow if you're going by the weekly pacing. If you're going at your own pacing, though, you might want to go ahead and do this. But in Google Classroom, I will have linked this article about Tenet and more specifically about how movies have been affected during the pandemic. I think this is a very relevant article. It's a bit lengthy, but it's not too bad, really. It looks longer than it is. The type is pretty big, so it shouldn't take you too long to read. But I think this is actually pretty relevant and interesting right now, thinking about how movies have been affected by this virus and everything, and how the movie industry might fare in the future. But after you read the article, or maybe even in the process of reading the article, whatever you want to do, you'll answer these questions. And for each question, I'm going to want you to be sure to use textual evidence and properly format your answer. That's very key. You need to properly format your answer every time. So, are people comfortable with going to the movie theater? Use text evidence to support your answer. And you'll have to do everything that I showed in that PowerPoint, like giving an introductory phrase, introducing the quote, using the formatting, and then providing an explanation. You're going to have to do that for every question here, except for question 5, where I'm asking you to make a claim about what the future of movie theaters will look like. Now, I'm not expecting you to know how to create a claim because I haven't taught that yet, but I just want to see how familiar you all are with creating claims. So no wrong answers here. I'll give you credit for whatever you do here. But for these parts, I'll be grading these a little bit more specifically based on if you follow along with what I did in the PowerPoint. All right, so that's it for today. You can either do that Tenet article assignment today, or you can follow along with the weekly pacing guide. All right, this is my last video for the week, so be sure to just keep on following along to what I have in the Google site. Thank you all.